Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today is none other than the feature narrative programmer of the Brooklyn Film Festival, Mr. Jason Stefaniak.
Yes.
Welcome, Jason. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. We always, we always appreciate when people make the schlep to the studio.
Yeah.
You're in Brooklyn. You guys are in Brooklyn, right?
The festival's in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully not too far.
Not too far.
But this is not just an interview for people who happen to be in the New York area. But we're going to talk festivals. We're going to talk about film festival strategy and about the Brooklyn Film Festival. So first, Tell me a little bit about you. So you're a filmmaker?
Yes.
How did you get into filmmaking, and then how did you come to the festival?
Yeah. So I wasn't one of those kids who was grabbing his father's or grandfather's camera. I was a kid who watched a lot of movies and rewatched a lot of movies and played along to them with my toys. And then there was a point in high school where something clicked, and all of a sudden I realized that I didn't want to be the things I was seeing in the movies, a pilot or an archaeologist. I wanted to make movies. And so I made videos whenever I could in place of assignments in school. I ended up studying film at Towson University in undergrad, and then came to grad school at NYU for my MFA, and have been in the city ever since. So I've been making short films and short stuff for about 20 years now. I made a feature. I produced a feature in 2014, 2015 called But Not For Me, and it had its world premiere at the Brooklyn Film Festival, where it won the Audience Choice Award. So I connected with the festival after we had our film there, and in connecting with them in the years afterwards, I was interested in being a volunteer screener and just screening a bunch of work for them. And in reaching out to them to do that, and then realizing that I'd had a film in the festival, that I understood what the festival was about, they asked me to be a programmer. So it was a good surprise, but really exciting to be asked to do that.
Very cool. So what do you do exactly? What is it like? Because when you say it's when you're a programmer, does that mean that you're making the selections for the film festival? Is that done by committee? Is it one dude in a room who just watches everything? How does that? What is your job exactly? Tell me exactly what you do for the fest.
I think it's different for every festival, and I think it was even different for Brooklyn in past years. But for this year, there's a programmer for each of our 6 sections, and each programmer is in charge of organizing the process of screening all the submissions in whatever way makes sense for her or him. So when I came on board in November, December, knowing I had 300 or 400 feature films to review between then and May 1st, I recruited volunteers to be screeners, the thing that I wanted to be for the festival, and then divided up the labor. I did most of the screening as the programmer, but then I would give these volunteer screeners batches of films, 15 or 20 or 25 films at a time. And then I would use them as sort of a committee. Even though we never gathered in the same room and they never met each other, I used them as a committee to kind of test their opinions of films, my opinions of films. If there was ever a filmmaker that submitted that I knew, I would make sure that I would remove myself from that process. So I would give that film to 2 different screeners without telling them.
So you're like a Supreme Court justice,
kind of
recusing yourself from.
Yes,
that's cool. That's honorable, man. Because like if I knew somebody, like if I knew you and I had a feature, I'd be like, Jason, get my movie in the. I mean, and I'm sure people do that too.
Yeah, and I've done that, as a filmmaker, and I think. I don't know how other programmers handle it. When I got those types of reach outs from people, I think in the least I would try to offer them a fee waiver or a discount waiver, knowing that I wasn't going to automatically program the film just because I knew them, and then their film would enter the pile and be considered like anybody else's film was. I tried not to give anyone any type of special treatment.
And so are you determining, you're part of the committee that's sort of determining who lives and dies in the film festival, so to speak, and then are you also saying when things are going to be screened at the festival?
Yeah, so once we got all those films reviewed and we had kind of a batch of finalist films that were all good and worth programming, we only could pick 13. We only could fit 13 features. So, we probably had 25 or 30 films that were worth programming, but we only could fit 13 based on the details of the schedule, and I got to make that decision. I had conversations sometimes with the executive director to get his opinion, but I was able to make that choice, and I did that trying to create a slate of films that felt balanced between genre, between budget, between material, where the filmmaker was from, what country it was from, so that we would have a really nice, diversified, interesting slate that didn't feel like all the same type of film.
So this is the thing that I've kind of never known, and that's why I wanted you here, man, because I want to get the secret sauce about film festivals.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, you're programming this slate of films. You got a baker's dozen of films here, right? So is it more about what you're offering the audience to come see? Or is it more about like giving filmmakers a certain kind of opportunity to be featured in a festival? Like, what's the criteria? Like, what does a film have to what does a film have to be like to get that stamp of approval and get on the slate?
Yeah, I think every festival probably approaches it differently. What was great about being asked to do this is that once they brought me on to do this, they were very empowering and having me approach how I was going to do this. They didn't give me a list of mandates. I understood the festival from having work in the festival, and so I set out to find films that compelled me enough to want to keep watching, just like any other audience member. And I would watch those films, and I would take notes, and at the end of the process, I had this pile of films. And then from this pile of films that were purely put in the pile because they were compelling, they made me want to watch, I then tried to build a slate that felt balanced. If we took a film that had been in Berlin, I didn't really want to take any other films that had gone to big festivals, because then it feels like you're taking a slot from an up-and-coming filmmaker who maybe has never screened at a festival before.
So it's a bit of both. It's a bit about opportunity, and it's also a bit about getting the diversity of films there.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like it's crazy subjective. Like
Very subjective.
You're going.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I got to ask you this: how many films 5 minutes in you're like, no?
Yeah, I mean, the line, like the way we thought about it.
Is there like a mandate, like you have to watch all 90 minutes or all 2 hours? Or are you just like, that's a terrible credit sequence, I'm not watching
I
this.
think you know pretty fast sometimes in your chest how the film's going. As a filmmaker, I think about all the work that goes into it and how heartbreaking it would be to think that this festival is only screening 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes of the film. But the reality is, when you have over 300, 400 features to watch, if you watch 10, 15, 20 minutes of something and you have a stack of reasons to say no, you end up moving on, because there are other films that, in 2 minutes you're so hooked you could watch 10 hours of it. And that's just a practical consideration.
Right, and if they haven't, I mean, it just goes to show you that, if you're going to make a movie, you've got to hook somebody in the beginning. Like, you're from the opening shot, the opening titles. I saw this interview with Saul Bass recently. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he did all those great title sequences for Hitchcock and stuff. And he was saying how audiences really should be engaged with the film from the first frame of the movie, the very first image that they see, and that's why he poured so much energy into great title sequences.
Yeah.
And the thing I notice with a lot of movies now, especially shorts and stuff, is that they don't even do that. They don't do the title sequence. They just jump right into the film because they don't want they want to waste no time. Just so that's probably the first nugget of advice to come out of this interview. So, great opening. Like if you want to hook the festival guy, man, you better do it in the first 5.
Well, I kept notes for myself as a filmmaker. What was I seeing across this mass amount of features that was working and not working for me? And one of the notes I kept for myself is to have a strong opening. And it's not just that if the film opens bad, we're turning it off. It's just often indicative of what is in store to come. You would watch 10, 15, 20 minutes more. You might jump 40 minutes ahead and watch another 10 minutes, and it's pretty consistent. I don't know if there was ever a film that after 10 or 15 minutes, if I felt like I was ready to move on, it ever recovered.
Yeah, you were like, man, by minute 45, this is just going to rock.
Right, right. And there may be films like that, and it's unfortunate, I guess, if we overlook them, but it's just a practical thing of getting through all the films that we have to get through.
So you said 300 films? How many?
I think
films?
it was like 328 this year.
Wow, so that's a lot of films.
Yeah.
Is there anything particularly subjective to the Brooklyn Film Festival? Because different channels. Like I know somebody who pitched to HBO a while back, and she was doing a documentary, and it was very good documentary. Wound up doing it as a web series. I was actually an editor on it, and the material was great. But HBO was like, There's no sex. There's no violence. There's no social justice angle. This is not for HBO.
Right.
Is there anything that's like this? This is good, but not for Brooklyn, or is it is it more generalized than that?
I think there's two answers to that. One, I was never given like a brand book for what the Brooklyn Film Festival is. Generally, it's about drawing attention to cinema in Brooklyn and Brooklyn being a center for cinema. And it's about giving Brooklyn audiences and city audiences in general access to independent filmmaking. And about discovering and amplifying new filmmakers, up-and-coming filmmakers that might make really good films that are imperfect and rough around the edges, but we want to give them a chance because their next film will be even better. So that piece of it, no. There's no kind of mandate. There's no list of things.
There's no style guide.
There's no style guide.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Like I respect that. I mean, but I also can respect somebody saying, this is the Coney Island Film Festival, and we want films that
Right.
are about Coney Island.
Right.
Because that's the audience that they're trying to curate.
I think in some way we specifically don't want a slate of films that when you look at it, you can sum up the whole slate of 13 in a couple words.
Right. They're not all shot in Prospect Park.
Exactly.
They're not all shot, in Brooklyn Bridge Park or something like that.
And so so the second part of that was that it is actually very subjective. In doing this, and at least the way that we did it this year, it makes me realize how much different festivals are just a reflection of the subjective taste of the people who program the festivals. And whoever those people are, however they earned their way into those spots, they have so much say over what gets programmed at that festival. And as a filmmaker, that actually made me realize, and as much as I understood this logically before, that any individual rejection is not some objective determination of what your talent is or isn't. It's one specific example of it not working for that festival.
Okay, so let's get into the what George W. Bush referred to as strategery, I think.
Yeah.
So let's talk film festival strategy.
Yeah.
So having said that, unless you're kind of a Mysterio mind reader, Professor Xavier type person, how are you going to know about that that programmer and their particular taste and what their team looks for? How do you kind of for film festival strategies, if you have a certain let's try a specific example. So say I made my first feature.
Yep.
And I made it for like $50,000, $75,000, not a huge budget, but I feel like it's competent and it's festival worthy. I think it's not just an internet movie. I want to get it in front of audiences. I want to get them laurels.
Yep.
So do I send to Toronto? Do I send to Sundance? Do I go to South by? Or is it, this movie, it's a lower budget film. Let me go to a smaller festival. Let me go to local film festivals. If you were to because you got your film into Brooklyn Film Festival, if you could go back and give yourself advice, what would to play the festival circuit? What would you say?
Yeah, I always aim high for the big festivals. At this point in my career, it would feel like a personal accomplishment. It would feel like a boost to the ego or to the self-esteem. I think there'd be a lot of value. But that's me having figured out a reason why I'm aiming for those big festivals. But I think it's a budget issue. If you only have so much money to submit to festivals and you've made a small film with no stars, maybe you feel like it's a little rough, the next one will be better, then maybe you're more practical about where you submit. But I tend to think you start big and...
Yeah, I was just going to say, with some of these things, if you're going to places like Toronto, you've got red carpet, movie stars in front of those things. Sundance, which used to be probably a lot more like Brooklyn, is you've got everybody out there is a movie star now. So, and it also kind of defines independent film now. It's almost easier to say what isn't an independent film versus what is an independent film, because almost everything that is not a studio big budget thing is, and they don't need festivals, but so if you were to go for the big fest, what would be, do you need a name in there, do you think, or are they even taking smaller films that don't have a big movie star backing?
I
don't even know if you can answer this, but I just thought I'd throw it
I
at
mean,
you.
my impression is kind of both. My impression is that, if you have a big star, you have a connection to the festival, if you've gone to the Sundance Writers Lab, it's much more likely you're going to get your feature into the Sundance Film Festival than if you're a total nobody. At the same time, with the feature that we did before we accepted the world premiere offer at Brooklyn, we submitted to all the festivals the same way everyone else does. And if we had a connection to the programmer, we might send them an email and say, please check out our film. And we had interest from the LA Film Festival. And it came down to them as a committee being interested in reaching out to ask questions and deciding at the end that they couldn't program it. But we didn't do anything different or special with them versus Brooklyn or any other smaller festivals that we got into.
So how important is the research beforehand? To go and,
very important.
So
Yeah.
like maybe go to the film festival the year before,
Right.
or check out the people. Maybe you have a connection there, maybe you don't. Maybe it's like a 6 degrees of separation kind of thing,
Yeah.
where you know somebody who knows somebody that knows somebody in that's working that festival. And I don't know. I mean, you seem like you're a fair guy, and you have willfully recused yourself from choosing your friends' films.
Yeah.
Is everybody like that, or
I don't know.
Yeah. That's the question. It's like,
I think a way of thinking about it is that the festival has a set of goals that could be different than what the filmmaker's goals are. And so if they get a recommendation from someone they know or from an alumnus, that feels right for the program they're putting together that year, they might just take that. It might feel unfair to everyone who's submitting blindly, but the festival has an agenda that's slightly different than an individual filmmaker's agenda.
Right, and if you know what that agenda is, then you can kind of determine, because this ain't cheap, folks. Like,
right.
Submitting to festivals can be a very costly process, and I think I didn't plan for it. I didn't put it in my budget when I first started trying to do it.
Right.
And then when I started researching and saying, okay, I want to get my first short out to film festivals and so forth, it was like, oh man, this is going to get real expensive real quick, and
yes,
hit them early bird. Those early bird deadlines, man.
Ask for waiver fees. Always there's no reason not to email a festival and ask for a submission waiver.
Can you do that?
Absolutely.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It was something I've always done.
How does that work? How do I?
You would just you find a list of you put together your list of festivals based on the schedule, based on your budget, based on personal interest. I grew up in Virginia. Always wanted to get into the Virginia Film Festival, so that was on the list for us. When you have that list, then you just start going through and you find contact info for programmers or the executive directors, and you just ask. My email was right on the website, and I got these emails, and I was given pretty free rein with being able to give out waivers and discounts. And so just to encourage people who were asking, I would almost always give at least a discount just to encourage them to feel connected to the festival and to want to submit. And in all my years of being a filmmaker and asking, I would say about 50 or 60% of the time we were offered either a total fee waiver or a discount.
That's amazing. I've literally never heard anybody say that about film festivals. And you're getting the good stuff here tonight, kids. Remember this show. So the other thing I wanted to know is, because the other thing that can be quite costly about film festivals is going to them.
Yeah.
Travel and accommodations and so forth. We're lucky. We live in New York City. There's a number of film festivals that take place here. I can get to most of them via the subway. So, but if you don't happen to live in a big city like L.A., New York, Toronto, you might. It might be like, maybe I don't submit to that one because I can't go there.
Right.
How important is it for people to show up and support their film and start, using that as a networking thing, not just say, oh, we got into this film festival, but really use the film festival and get there?
Yeah. I mean, speaking from the perspective of the festival this year, I found it really important to try to get the filmmakers to come. I want to do Q&As with them. I want to meet the people whose films excited me enough that they made it through and got programmed. I want them to come. As a filmmaker, I think the best way to approach it is to figure out what you're trying to accomplish with festivals. So I've submitted to a lot of festivals, shorts, all over the country, and they've gotten in here and there, and I've often not traveled for short film festivals. I can't say how helpful it is to go to a big Sundance-like festival if you have a world premiere of a feature, are probably really valuable. I think everything else in between, you need to figure out, what are you trying to get out of the festival? Are you trying to make contacts? Do you want to see your film with an audience of strangers? Do you want to try to generate some press for your film? Do you want to use a festival as a stepping stool to launch your film on iTunes? And I think if you figure out what that thing is you want, it's easier to make decisions about which festivals to go to and not to go to.
That's a key thing as well, because you brought up marketing. And I remember, like many years ago when I did my first festival, I didn't really know anything. And I just kind of was very naive about the process. And then when I went to go to like the opening night, I saw people putting out postcards and posters and, start talking to people, say, hey, come see my film. I was like, oh my God, it's on us to do this.
Yeah.
Like I thought, oh, the festival is just going to advertise these films. And they're going to show my trailer, they're going to show my my poster, and then people will just come because they want to see the festival.
Right.
Not so.
Not entirely so,
Yeah.
no. I mean, the Brooklyn Film Festival has a list of things we ask every filmmaker to submit: postcards, posters, screening copies of their films that we send out to the press. And then a lot of times individual press outlets become interested in individual films, and then we connect them with the filmmakers. So the festival does an amount of work to try to get the community interested in the entire festival and in the entire slate of feature films. But speaking from my own experience and seeing it from this side, it's definitely beneficial for individual filmmakers to promote their screenings, because nobody in the end is going to care more about filling every seat of your screening than you are. The festival wants to fill those seats and sell tickets and have a great event, but they're trying to do that with 13 features and 10 doc features and 4 other categories of films for 10 days straight. We don't have the resources to focus on every individual screening the way an individual filmmaker would.
How important is like the social media aspect of it now in terms of, not just going to the film festival, but Instagramming it and Facebooking it and, building up that buzz beforehand? Even maybe like if you were doing it, maybe you set up your own Facebook event and say, come to my screening as opposed to
you should do that.
The festival screening. Because you're right, it's just too many films. It's a lot of films,
right.
And one person, the way it's set up, you can't go to all the movies.
Right.
So, and if you're plunking your money down per film, I mean, I suppose you guys have festival passes.
We do. I'm not sure offhand how much it costs, but there's a pass that gets you into everything.
Right. But, not everybody's going to do that. Some people are just going to go see individual films.
Right.
So as a movie goer, you just can't do all that.
Right.
Now, if you're a filmmaker too, you guys have a certain link with the press. But should I be sending out press releases and trying
I think so.
To get those people to come to the screening?
Absolutely.
Because it is like there is a sort of a validation by just getting into a fest, almost any fest, and getting those laurels on something.
Yeah. You can put on your poster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And winning awards. I mean, if you're best in fest or you're the best of your category, it really can be quite compelling. Even if that film doesn't do anything, even that film doesn't sell a lot of tickets, doesn't get a theatrical release, you can say, I did this fest, I got this, and for me, it's like the networking aspect of it. If you get your film in something and then start talking to people, start shaking hands, and go to those parties. Go to the opening night thing, go to the closing night thing.
Yeah. I like to think of social media as a record of the story of the film. This is my personal way of approaching it. So, if you live in New York, you live somewhere and your film gets into a festival there, you're using social media to try to get your friends and family to come to the screenings. And the festivals definitely want you to do that. They're hoping particularly that local filmmakers can draw on their network to fill screenings. But most, if you're lucky enough to get your film in these festivals all over the place, you're not going to be able to go to all of them. But I find that it's helpful to post about those festivals to lend an air of legitimacy about your film. You never know if there's going to be a producer's rep or a sales agent at a festival that sees your film. And then if you do eventually get your film onto iTunes or Amazon, I think having a social media account to be able to draw from, to promote the film, or just to show distributors or to show sales agents that there's built-in audience, that you're good at doing this type of thing, you're interested in promoting the film, is helpful. And even from a personal aspect, then years down the road, you can go back and look at your film's page and scroll through and feel like you built and accomplished something with that project.
Yeah, and it really is kind of a DIY thing these days.
Absolutely.
With the advent of social media, it's on you guys. For filmmakers out there, it's on you to promote this thing. Nobody's going to do it for you. The festival's not going to. They can only do so much, and gathering an audience is hard. You know, it's a lot of legwork, and you have to build that into your budget. You got to build that into the amount of time it's going to take you.
Yep.
Because it just you know, it's such a Herculean effort just to make a movie.
Yeah.
But then to get butts in seats and to get it seen it's like making a whole other movie.
Yeah.
But Jason, thanks so much. I got to wrap up, but great stuff. I think this is like essential information and like stuff I didn't know, and hopefully stuff that will enlighten our audience. But before I go, tell me, where can we find the Brooklyn Film Festival on the web?
Yeah, it's wbff.org. And my email's on there, so if anyone has any other questions, they can feel free to email me. It's just jason@wbff.org.
All right, so everyone who sees this is going to now ask you for waivers.
That's right. No guarantees, but I'll try.
You did this to yourself.
I know.
Anyway, thanks so much for coming, and thank you for joining us for more episodes of No Rest for the Weekend. You can always find them on our website, btrp.nyc/podcast. You can also catch us on all the places that you listen to podcasts, like iTunes and Anchor and Stitcher and Google Play, and all those. We're all over the place right now. But thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole, and we'll see you next time.